Welcome, everybody. My name is Lori Cohen. I'm the founder and executive director of the Beagle Alliance. And of course, many of you join our town halls regularly. Happy New Year. Here we are in 2025. I'm just going to say that we're going to do a live Q&A after. We are recording this, so it will be up on our YouTube channel and a link on our site later on. We have Bee with us, who's our tech genius, who will help with anything as we go along, as she waves. But I just want to say that for the very first town hall, we really could not be more honored and blessed to have the guests that we have today. I personally think that this town hall is the most important and beautiful start to the year of what we hope to be an amazing year. So I don't want to rattle on. Doctorate in biochemistry and molecular biology. Founder, most of you know this incredible woman as the founder and executive director at the Canadian Centre for Alternatives to Animal Methods. She's done a TED Talk. She is a renowned researcher, speaker, one of the most charismatic women that I've ever met. Of course, I'm a little biased because she is also my dear friend and I love her. And a passionate advocate for animal-free science. There's just been countless news stories on her work. And again, it's an honor to have Dr. Charu Chandrasekera here chatting about her work, her passion, and what we hope to see in the future. So welcome, my dear friend, and thank you for being here.
Oh my God, thank you for that warm welcome. I'm blushing here. Thank you, Lori. It's a pleasure to be here. And I know that we all collectively work really hard in this beautiful country of ours to do what we know is right for humans, animals, and our environment. So it's a pleasure to be here, even under the current circumstances. So thank you for having me.
Well, thank you. And so, yeah, let's, and I'm going to say to everyone right now, as most of you know, our town halls are pretty casual, they're pretty informal, and that's how we're going to go. So, let's talk about Charu.
I don't know when you introducing me as
you
introducing me as the founder and executive director of the Canadian Centre for Alternatives to Animal Methods. I no longer have that.
Correct. So
I just recently updated my LinkedIn profile with an end date. It's surreal. It feels surreal. This was supposed to last for generations to come. It was something that Canada desperately needed because we are lagging behind so many other countries when it comes to animal-free science and animals in science. And so it's hard for me to believe that it came to that.
Okay, so for those that maybe don't know exactly what happened, and because we want to talk about the inspiration behind you even going in the direction that you went, right? We have to touch on that, but fill everybody in on where we're at in Canada and what happened at the end of last year that has now sort of been, we had said in our post, has hope been deferred for animal-free science? Tell us what happened with the University of Windsor and the closure.
So what happened, I know many of you probably know my story, right? So this was when I established the center. It was to really fill a big void in Canada. We did not have a center dedicated exclusively to developing and promoting animal-free methods. I mean, there were centers like mine all across the globe that were established many years ago, some like 25, 30 years ago, but we were missing that. And so I took that. It was literally a back of a napkin idea brought into reality. I worked really hard to make that dream happen, made many personal sacrifices to bring it to the way it was, from a back of a napkin idea to an internationally recognized center, placing Canada on the map in the international arena in this area. So it was doing really well at the University of Windsor, but the university itself is going through major financial difficulties, right? They, just like any other university in Ontario, especially, but across Canada in general, I would say right now. And they could no longer support the work that I was doing. They restructured everything, financial restructuring, and they got rid of a number of different programs, including mine. But it really, at the end of the day, it was not the responsibility of a single university in this country to host a national center like this. It was the responsibility of the federal government to do this, because every other center like mine, the one in the US, the European Union, multiple other countries, Brazil, Japan, Korea, they're all federally funded. And I'm not talking like, a few $100,000 here or there. Their annual budgets are like 5 million, 7 million a year, 19 million a year, 17 million a year, money that I could only dream of. And so that money never came. I mean, I wasn't even asking for that much money from the Canadian government. So the money never came, and we ran out of money. And it has been a difficult journey since then. It really came to that point where I had to leave, and all my state-of-the-art laboratory that was once Canada's pride in this field is now sitting in a storage unit, a U-Haul storage unit in Ottawa.
It's hard to imagine, and hard to imagine. And I want to talk about this for a moment, because I think this is really important to note, and you can speak to this, Charu, but we as Canadians, I think that we're fabulous. We think we're very compassionate, and of course we are, as the Canadian public. But I think there's a bit of a disconnect from how we see ourselves in the world of being the incredibly just laid back and caring Canadians that we are as a society, and we know that we are. And yet there's a disconnect to what we're doing in the world, especially with animals. Our animal, and I want to say this from the point of, I mean, this is the reason we started the Beagle Alliance, was because we looked at the protections for animals, and there was literally none compared to the United States. And we always like to think that we're, the kinder version. And, here we were with no protections for animals, and nobody spoke about animals in research. There's a very vague law in Ontario, and that's it. And other than that, the exemptions of all the laws in each provinces allow for animal research to go on without the public being aware that it's happening. And most don't know.
This is a very interesting question, because every time I talk to Canadians, right, whether I'm sitting on a via train or on a plane, or going to a veg fest, giving a talk, or simply at the grocery store sometimes, right? So you have these random conversation, and people ask me, so what do you do? And when I explain, people are like, almost every single person that I've spoken to in the last 7, 8 years, oh, we still do animal testing in Canada? And then when I explain the extent to which we do animal testing, they're like, please tell me we're leading the world in shifting away from animal testing. And I'm like, no, we are not. Absolutely not. We're nowhere near leading the world. We can be. We have enough brilliant people in this country to be doing that, but we are not. And the thing is, a lot of people are unaware. I mean, if you look at the statistics from the past few years, or in the past decade, and just citing some statistics from 2023, those are the latest numbers that we have from the Canadian Council on Animal Care, the federal nonprofit organization that accredits or oversees publicly funded institutions conducting animal research. The numbers are that we use about 3.5 million animals per year that we know of, because private companies in this country don't count. They're not required to be accredited by this organization. So I'm sure there are other companies that are doing this that we don't know about. We don't know the exact number they've used. And when you think about that number, the European Union uses about 8.2 million. So if you were to calculate a per capita number, we use 3 to 4 times more animals per person in
Per
this
capita.
country than the European Union plus Norway, so 28 countries combined. How is that possible? And then up until 2 years ago, we had no legislation. And I had the honor, I think I would say that other than setting up this Center for Alternatives in Canada, one of my biggest accomplishments was in directly influencing federal law. So the Canadian Environmental Protection Act was amended back in 2023. It is now law that the government of Canada has to essentially phase out chemical testing on animals. We don't know by when, but it is the legislation now requires the government to replace, reduce, and refine the use of animals in chemical safety testing. And the government also has to develop a roadmap, a strategic plan to do so. And Health Canada actually developed a draft plan. It was open for public comment and only closed at the end of November. And the full plan will be published by the middle of by June this year. So yes, we now have that legislation. We banned cosmetic animal testing in Canada a decade after the European Union did it.
Exactly.
And then we have the strategic plan coming up. This was like 8 years after the United States did it. So it's like the number one question, I've mentioned this before, and I mentioned this in front of the parliamentary committee when I testified in that committee to influence this legislation. Every time I give a talk, especially in the European Union, people always ask me, why don't Canadians care? And I don't think I still have an answer. Well, especially now, because now people, there was an article that our brilliant journalist, Jessica Scott Reed, wrote to the Globe and Mail last year. There were international experts calling out everyone saying, for a country like Canada, what's worse than not having a center is to have one and close it. So people don't understand. And for the most part, we are a complacent nation. And going back to your point, I think we feel like we're happy. It's true. It's a great nation. We feel happy. We have our basic, needs taken care of. And we are compassionate people. We like to think everything is glorious, but it's not. And I think that we don't take enough. Why is it that we are so behind? I don't have an answer. Maybe people can provide that answer, a justifiable answer as to why we aren't more proactive, why we aren't doing more. The European Union is now at the stage of, there were 1 million people who sent out signatures to change some of their laws to phase out animal testing altogether. When will we do that?
Yeah, and there's a couple of points here too, because again, I think it really does. And I actually had a call with someone yesterday, and they said that they've been talking about animal testing, and they have helped do fundraisers for us. And they said, whenever they're speaking about it, pretty much everyone who they talk to just simply doesn't know. So then it really begs the question, how do we spread awareness? Because we know we're a caring country. We know we're a country that loves animals. We at the Beagle Alliance have taken the stand that we want to start with the dogs, because we know that, well, and I want to speak to this point too, because the most recent statistics just came out from the Canadian Council on Animal Care. How did this happen? It's a twofold statement, what I'm about to make right now, because it could be looked at in the positive and looked at obviously in the negative. But in 2022, the statistics for dogs tested on, as reported, because as you said, Charu, private organizations and private facilities in Canada go unchecked. If they don't want to be members of the Canadian Council on Animal Care, they don't have to be, and they don't have to report to them. I'm gonna go off to the side a bit and say that the difference in the United States, because I worked for an organization in the United States for years, so I knew a little bit, I knew more for a while what happened in the United States than in Canada. But there's a level of transparency, I think surprisingly to Canadians in Canada, like in the United States, that the FDA does monitor there is more of a transparency in that there is a database of facilities, both private and public, in the United States, where not only do you know where the facilities are operating and what they're doing, but also what species they're testing on, how many, like there's a level of transparency. Whereas in Canada, if you're not reporting to the CCAC, you're just under the wire. So in 2022, the statistics for dogs tested on animals in Canada was just over 10,000 dogs. They just released their 2023 statistics and it's over 16,000 dogs. So how are we using, just as dogs as an example, how are we using more? Is it because there's more people reporting, which would obviously be a good thing if we had more facilities reporting, but chances are there's not more facilities reporting. So how are we using more? And I use dogs as the example, number one, because the Beagle Alliance specializes, that's our expertise. Number two, we fundamentally believe that the way to make people aware about animal testing is through the love of dogs, because we have a special relationship as a culture with that particular animal. So there's a lot of complexities here, but I think it really does come down to the fact that Canadians don't know.
But it's hard to believe, though. I mean, as you said, so dog use went up by 55%, right? So was the primate use. So we use like
Right.
55% more primates in 2023 than we did in 2022. The overall animal use numbers went down, but some of these other species went up, not just by 2%, 5%. So I highly doubt it was, a whole bunch of other companies. Maybe it was. Maybe there were a couple of companies that were using a lot of dogs and they just decided to sign up. Or maybe some of the other facilities just started using more. It's really possible. We wouldn't know. And that's the thing, right? With the US, it's the US Department of Agriculture. They have a database that is publicly accessible. Anyone can go and see which companies were cited with violations of animal welfare, which companies did what. It's actually quite empowering to know those things and to know that your government is working for you. In Canada, yes, there are people at the Canadian Council on Animal Care who are very committed and they do a lot of hard work on a very tight budget. It's just that we don't have a system set up for that transparency, which should come from a federal agency. Right? Nonprofit organization can't have that kind of thing. So at least take the numbers and make them available through a government agency or something like that. There should be a way for us to be able to access that. And hopefully, some of these things will change over time so we could like be on par with some of other quote unquote developed nations, But yeah, it's true. Like, so why is it like this? I really don't know. I don't know what the answers are. And when it comes to education, like how much can you do? I mean, this is 2025. Everyone is on some kind of social media. You have access to news 24/7, access to the internet. So how do you really run another full education campaign? And if you were to put the resources into that, is that really going to help? So I'm not sure. I don't have the answers, but the information is out there for us to find out what animal testing is. And it does make the news quite often with so many different things. And so perhaps maybe we should, like organizations like yours and mine and many others like Animal Justice Humane Canada, we can all get together and do more. But I think people also have to take a proactive role. That's what's happening in so many other countries. I don't, so it's one of those points where we really have to look at ourselves and think, where are we lagging behind and what can we do collectively together? The burden can't be on one or two individuals, and that's what it is in Canada. We are small. We only have a certain number of animal welfare organizations and a certain number of people, and it's difficult to do everything. And so we really count on the public to play a proactive role. And there are amazing Canadians like yourselves who are here today to do this. And so there are thousands of Canadians from coast to coast who are doing this. And so I think the primary thing is for, excuse me, for those who are aware, please educate your friends, your families, and your anyone, right? Social media, share things, talk about it anywhere. When you go to the grocery store and you're waiting in line and you see somebody using a product that has the cruelty-free symbol on it, have a conversation. And maybe they didn't even know it was cruelty-free, but just have that conversation. This is how we can really help spread the knowledge. Or like organizations can only do so much, but I think that we can all play a role, because at the end of the day, it is our collective responsibility. And it's not just, right, when you're talking about animal testing, it isn't just about saving the animal. Of course, that matters. It is one of the primary things, but think about everything else. And I always say this, 95% of drugs tested to be safe and effective in animals fail in human clinical trials. So you have someone suffering from Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, diabetes, heart failure, stroke, cancer. There are no cures around the corner waiting for you. And as long as animal research remains the primary and the only and the gold standard, be all end all method of inquiry in scientific research, none of this is really going to change. And so if you don't, I mean, there are people who don't really care about animals. They're like, well, why don't you experiment on 10,000 dogs if you're going to cure this disease in my grandmother or my child? Well, isn't that simple. Just because you do it in a dog doesn't mean you're going to find the cure. So I think that everybody may have a different reason. But I think people need to be aware of the scientific facts as well. So that's research and drug development. And then on the other hand, you have all these chemicals. In Canada, we have over 80,000 chemicals in commerce. Around the world, there are about 350,000 chemicals that are registered. Most of these do not have full safety profiles. So we are currently unaware of all the adverse effects that you could potentially have from long-term exposure to many of these chemicals. And if we were to rely on these traditional animal methods, it'll take several centuries to do that. So that's why we really need to play an active role to protect ourselves, our environment, and of course, phasing out animal testing is a scientific and an ethical responsibility that we all have to it's a responsibility that we share, that we should really work toward.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I want to correct myself because you're right, it was the USDA and I think I said FDA, but that it's the USDA that in the United States that has a transparency that Canada doesn't have. And I think it's a great point, and it's something that we try to say as well, is that this is a societal issue. You don't have to be in love with animals to have a stake in this issue. This affects all Canadians and all humans, because there's a failure rate with the animal use model that people are unaware of. So I guess on two levels, we are, as humans, the stewards of the animals and therefore have a responsibility to them. But even if we don't feel that way, or as that's not our priority, and everyone, of course, has different belief systems, your grandmother's Alzheimer's is not getting cured by, putting your dollar in at the grocery store for animal research when they ask you for your donation, right? Because that's my thing. I had this conversation with someone actually, Charu, it was at Niagara Falls when the conference was on, and we were talking about how they pressure you to give your donation at every store that you're at. And I'm one of those horrible people that says, no. And then I tell them why, or else, the grocery store will say, would you like the deal of the week? And it'll be some, thing it's some product that's tested on animals. And my response will be, well, no, just so you know, they test on animals. And I'll just make sure I get my little education piece in. But let's move for a minute, because I think the point has been made, and it's about spreading awareness and about the facts of the animal welfare piece and the human welfare piece. But let's hit the emotional piece. Why? How come you're here?
It's a difficult question to answer right now, given where I am. I think some of you may have heard this story before, right? I was an animal researcher. I did animal testing on mice and rats mostly, and rabbits, and I've seen dogs with heart failure. So I was a cardiovascular researcher. And there were two profound moments, epiphanies, whatever you want to call them, that changed my life forever. And if you have time, I'll tell you very briefly. I would call them a scientific epiphany and an ethical epiphany. The two different ones. The scientific one was I was doing, this was after my PhD, I was doing postdoctoral training at a university in the US. I live in Windsor, right across the river from Detroit. So I was working on the other side of the border and doing this cardiovascular research on mice mostly. And we had these genetically modified animals that would develop heart failure over time because of the manipulations that we had done. So during this time, while I was working on these, what we call receptors, these are certain biomolecules located in the heart that if they were activated in time, it would be protective for the heart, especially after a heart attack. So during this same time, I'd been in this lab for like 4 years, and during this time, my dad had a heart attack. And, I'd always loved the heart. It was my favorite organ when I was doing my PhD. And even for that training, I really liked cardiovascular research for the reason that I wanted to help humans with heart failure, heart disease, and that. It was never my intention to cure mice heart disease, but I thought it was absolutely necessary. And this is ingrained in you when you're in graduate school or in the scientific culture in general, that you have to be doing animal research to become a well-rounded scientist. So I was doing all of this work. And my dad had a heart attack, required quadruple bypass surgery. So I spent like 3 weeks with him. And I remember he had the surgery done in Halifax. They were living in PEI at the time. And I was there right after the surgery. I was sitting in this for days. I was sitting in his recovery room, and I still remember I was sitting by his bedside, and I could see all these other patients who had one form of another bypass surgery. And I looked, and it was one of these moments, I don't know how to describe this. I looked at my father and I looked at everyone else, and it was just like, things that I'm doing right now, is that really going to help people like my father? And it was one of, and I knew that, like, that's why I went into science, but it was just, I don't know how to explain it. It was just so profound. And it just overcame me. And I looked at him, I looked at everyone, and I'm like, I hope that the work that I'm doing is going to help them, some people like this someday. So a few weeks later, I came back to the lab and I ran into this, really, like, this is a cardiovascular researcher who had been funded for like 25 years from the National Institutes of Health in the United States, lots of money to do this kind of research with mice. And so I asked him, and I said, do you think these receptors were activated in my dad's heart during his heart attack, right? The molecules that I was studying in the heart. I said, do you think they were activated in my dad's heart during this heart attack? And the response I heard was, how the hell would I know? We've never looked at it in the human heart. This is now a researcher who had spent 25 plus years looking at these things in the mouse heart. And that was his response. How the hell would I know? I would never forget that. And that moment, it did something to me. And by that time, I had already realized all the, the colossal limitations of animal models, animal research, animal testing. I had already realized that it was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back. I don't like to use that expression, but you know, it's like it was like my thing. It's like, oh my God, what am I doing here then? If we don't know this in the human heart. So that really, it was a couple of months later, I left. I left that research lab. I just walked away from it all. The other side of the story, the ethical epiphany was with my cat, Mowgli. This is this beautiful, beautiful being that came into my life and completely turned it upside down. And you know, I always had cats when I was growing up in Sri Lanka, but once we moved to Canada and everything, I didn't have a cat. Mowgli was my first cat who came into my life. When I first started doing animal research, you know, I did my PhD in Calgary, moved to Windsor, started working in these animal research labs, and Mowgli came into my life at about the same time. And she just transformed it. I think I developed this unbreakable bond with her, an unprecedented bond, a bond that I had never had with any other animal before. And one of the most profound moments was I just got really close to her very quickly, and there was something about her. Her eyes were absolutely captivating. And every time I looked at her, I just saw something in her, that there was life, there was consciousness, there was that they were just like us. I would see this innocence and purity and a being. So I walked away from all of this at the end of 2012. I walked away from animal research academia, and I joined the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, the US nonprofit organization promoting alternatives to animal testing. I joined them as their director of laboratory science, and a few months later, and when I joined them, I was exposed to a whole other world. I went to these meetings at FDA, the European Union, and so many places where our industry, government, academics, they all came together to discuss alternatives to animal testing and promoting that. And I was like, what is this? So then a few months later, Mowgli actually passed away. The night before she passed, I made a promise to her, and I said, I promise you that I will save 100 animals from being experimented on in Canada. I had no idea that 4 years later, I would set up a National Center for Alternatives and I would influence legislation. I had no idea I would do all that, but that's what I promised her. And I have exceeded that promise by, I don't know how many fold, but that was, and to this day, I think that is the guiding light in my heart. It's the reason I do what I do. It's the reason I sacrifice so much to keep this center alive.
Okay, well, it's not fair that we don't get to see that everyone's camera is off because all of us have tears and we are seeing each other, but you guys all have your cameras off. So turn your damn cameras on so I can see your tears, because we're all just like moved. And you know, let's just talk candidly for a moment, because Charu and I are friends, and oh man, we pep talk the hell out of each other. This is not over.
It cannot be.
This cannot be over. Exactly. This cannot be over.
You know, at the end of the day, Lori, how many times have I told you, if I just wanted a job, good God, I wouldn't be doing this.
Right.
Because there is a tremendous amount of responsibility on your shoulder. You feel like you're fighting alone, but I mean, technically, there are so many people who are supportive, so I'm not discounting that at all. But it feels like when you have something like this, when you believe so strongly that you can make a difference. And I often think that it's not every day that we would get a chance to do something that's beyond us, something that would have a lasting impact for generations to come. And especially, right, we are in Canada, a so-called first world nation with so much money and resources. And why are we struggling to do the right thing to benefit animals, humans, and our environment?
Exactly.
And there's so much. So it's just hard to believe.
To not prioritize, because it comes down to priority. When the government is doling money out, it comes down to priority. And so if the money's not flowing from the government, it means that it's not a priority, which means that, the human welfare is not a priority and the animal welfare is not a priority. And I hate saying that because it's blunt and, probably not something that I maybe should say out loud. I don't know, but everything in the world comes down to priorities individually in our lives, as we all make our decisions as to whether we're going to buy cruelty free and, who we're going to donate to and who we're going to share posts. Like, I mean, every decision, whether we think it's small or large, is a representation of what our priorities are and what is important to us. And I think it's, at this moment in time, a crying shame that Canada is not making this a priority for both its human citizens and its animal citizens.
And that's the thing, right? The Liberal government started off well. They wanted to end cosmetic animal testing, they did, and they promised to end chemical toxicity testing on animals by 2035. That was in their election platform.
Absolutely.
In
Right.
2021. Well, you're not going to be able to do that without a National Center for Alternatives. You're not going to make headway with that at all. So that's where I don't understand why a country like Canada wouldn't have, a couple of $1 million a year to dedicate to this when other comparable nations, So I talked to one Liberal MP once, this was sometime last year when I got notice from the University of Windsor that, the center was going to be closing. And there's Liberal MP, and I said, please do something. Speak with, the finance minister, the prime minister, whomever you need to. And, one of the answers that I got was, please don't compare us to economic giants like the United States and the European Union. And I said, oh, please, let me try to find you a country that maybe we can then be more comparable with. And I said, how about the Netherlands? They're half our population, half our GDP. They just committed 124.5 million euros over 10 years for their national center to promote alternatives to animal testing.
Yeah.
So okay, that's a more comparable country. Let's not compare us to the United States or the European Union, sure. Oh, here, let me just pick a country, right? So it doesn't make sense. It does not make sense.
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Okay, well, I want to give us time because I know I'm hoping and I'm pretty sure people want to chat with you and have questions for you themselves. And I want to have that. I want to give everybody that opportunity because I think this is a very, we're honored to have you here. And I think it's an amazing opportunity for people to be able to chat with you personally. But I want to say that something that you and I are very, very much passionate. We're very passionate about. The Beagle Alliance is passionate about. Is that it's not just about what we're doing now. It's about really educating the future lawmakers and consumers and researchers and legislature. The future children who are going to go on to carry on with the work that everybody in animal welfare is doing and that's really important to both of us, and we've chatted about that. So you have a video that, I mean, if you guys aren't crying now, we're going to make you cry tonight. Okay. So that,
that is not my intention.
That was not the goal. that wasn't the goal. But as this is going on, I'm realizing it's like, okay, you're just going to cry tonight. But you have a video, and it's a special video because it's not out there and it's not to be shared. This is really
not publicly, not yet.
Not publicly. Yeah. Like this is a special share that you really have only shared with some select people and you've agreed to share tonight. So I can't thank you enough. And I just, it's something else. So why don't you
So
share screen?
the background is that, you know, when I had the center, there were three key pillars. One pillar was research and development, so developing technologies. I mean, we had 3D bioprinted tissue models to look at complex biological, you know, to capture complex biology in a petri dish, right? Essentially. And then there was a regulatory pillar where I worked with Health Canada, Environment Canada, and foreign regulatory agencies to modernize these regulatory testing paradigm, you know, shifting away from animal testing for product safety, for chemicals and consumer products and things like that. And then the third pillar was an academic pillar. And this is where I really wanted to make a difference, because when you think about, we live in a scientific culture ingrained in animal research, a culture that is obsessed with animal research, culture that, you know, essentially requires you to validate human data using animals. And so I wanted to train a generation of scientists who wouldn't think like that. Scientists, essentially, and this is one of my catchphrases, you know, I want to train the next generation to think outside the cage. And I have had tremendous success so far with the small number of students that I was able um, to introduce these concepts to at the University of Windsor. And I'm going to, before I show you the video, so I developed and plans were underway to develop a master's program in this field, and I developed Canada's first graduate course. It was called the Human Subject, Animal-Free Methods in Biomedical Research and Toxicology. And, you know, I'm teaching it one last time this semester at the University of Windsor. And this is the third week of classes, right? I got this email from a fourth year undergraduate student in my class just last night when I was feeling down and trying to figure out how to move forward. She sends this email: "Hello, Dr. Charu. I hope this email finds you well. I wanted to take a moment to share how much I've been enjoying your class. It's been such a meaningful experience, and I genuinely appreciate how engaging and thought-provoking the content is. It's rare to find a class that not only teaches valuable concepts in science, but also challenges me to reflect deeply and apply what I've learned in my life and work. As a microbiologist, I have opportunities to incorporate animal testing into my research. In the past, I hadn't given it much thought, but this course has profoundly shifted my perspective. I now feel more strongly than ever that there are alternative paths we should pursue. Your teaching has made a lasting impact on me, and I'm grateful for the awareness and insight I've gained. Thank you for such an incredible learning experience." This is like, I get dozens of letters like this all the time, all the time. So what happened was in 2023, the conference that Lori's talking about, I hosted and chaired the largest and the most prominent conference series in this field. I put in an international bid, won it, and so we brought that conference to Canada, the 12th World Congress on Alternatives and Animal Use in Life Sciences. I co-hosted it with Health Canada and Environment Canada. It was an incredible conference. There were like between 800 to 900 people there. And during the opening ceremony, I showed this video. It was the only time it has really been shown. And I think I showed it at another animal justice conference one year, the same year, right after the conference, I think. But I haven't made it public yet. It will be released publicly in due time. And I received an email from a little girl who was in grade 4 at that time, saying that she needed to do an assignment. It was to research about an inspirational Canadian and do a speech, and she chose me as her inspirational Canadian.
Humane education, compassionate education, and teaching alternatives is the way forward.
Absolutely. This generation is ready. I mean, she is very young. Look at her.
Yeah.
She was 10 years old when she, you know, said that to me. And then the student who just sent me that message last night, anyone I teach, like they're in their early 20s, they're ready, and they are kids of this century, really. And they're ready to learn, and they will, and they don't have to think like everyone else does. The way we've been doing things for the last century and a half doesn't have to continue that way. And the next generation is ready. They're like sponges. They're ready to use this new technology. I mean, if you have an iPhone 16 in your pocket, then you're not really thinking about animal dissection, are you? You know, it's one of those things where that generation is ready, and we have to. I mean, that's my dream right now, to get the center established again. And the goal is to really, the reason why my equipment and everything else is sitting in a storage locker in Ottawa is because that's where I do hope to reestablish the center if I can find enough money to do that.
Yeah.
And you know, I do have a university that's willing to take the center on, and the reason why I really want this to be at a university is for that reason, to develop academic programs, to train the next generation. I think is critically important to have that piece.
Yeah, I agree. And I, of course, have been blessed to speak at the University of Windsor because of you and to chat about what the Beagle Alliance was doing. And that was an honor. And of course, we speak at schools around Manitoba and with our humane education program, and the kid and I mean it boils down to their just desire to know why we're doing something that we don't have to be doing. And I think though I do just want to, before I open the questions up, and I appreciate you sharing that, Charu, but before we open the questions up, I want to say, and I think that I'm going to call you out, Maddie, right now, because you're sitting there. Um, this is how Maddie and I met, from Justify, but um, you know, when you said that you tested on animals and that's what you had to do to be a well-rounded scientist because you wanted to help humanity, um, that's the exact reason why, as an organization, the Beagle Alliance refuses to shame the laboratories, the animal care workers, the scientists. And we see that so many have some negative statements. And sorry, my cat just jumped up on me, so I don't know if you can see, but his tail's in the air. But that's why we refuse, for a couple of reasons. Number one, people have belief systems and they're not necessarily horrible belief systems. You went into science and were testing on animals because you wanted to help humanity, bottom line. There's that why would we crucify you for that? And we have to acknowledge that different people are at different processes in their life and where they are. And the best that we can do is educate and hope that people see another way. And when we shame them, they're going to turn away from us. But if we just simply educate in a kind way, then we don't lose them. And that's what we hope to do, is just say, look, like, can we do this? Can we work together for the love of the animals, for the love of humanity? Can we do this a different way? No harm, no foul. Let's all just move towards what works best for everyone. Anyway, I think, you know, we've had that conversation where it's just a matter of education. I think everyone could agree. But I'm going to open the floor up right now because we're at the hour point, which never really matters for us. We go over time all the time. We don't even pretend to say we're going to be an hour. So as long as everyone is okay being here, I've got a couple things in the chat. So Laura has said, in Canada, it seems no matter who is in government, all animal welfare please fall on deaf ears. What do you say to that, Charu?
And that's the same question that I often get asked, right? Why don't Canadians care? I don't know what the answer is, because I think we are a country full of animal lovers and compassionate people. So I don't know why it is like that. Yeah, and the thing is, right, people, and I know that last fall, Animal Justice and Humane Canada and the Beagle Alliance, they had a letter writing campaign. There were many people, I think, many people who wrote to the government and said, don't let this center shut down or fund it, whatever. And so the people do care, but I just don't know in general why that is the case.
Yeah, I agree. I can't it's hard not to I mean, we are of the stance, and you know this because we spoke at the Canadian Animal Law Conference this past year, and I mean there is part of our thought process is that if you inundate people with too many things that are just so hard to handle, people kind of shy away from it. It becomes like an overstimulation and you just can't, it's too much to bear. It's kind of the way we hear people say all the time that, we've all been desensitized to watching humans hurt. We can all watch crime shows on TV and watch that, but if an animal dies on a TV, we're all like, no, I can't watch that thing. Like, so, and that's kind of why we've focused on the dogs primarily, because if you're going to hit the majority of people, even if they desensitize themselves to the number of animals, the 3.5 million number of animals in Canada being used, if you hit them where the heart is with the dogs, then maybe that'll spark something that they can go, okay, I can't see this happening. But it is still something that, how do you answer that? For some reason, it is falling on deaf ears, and we have to change that, obviously. Maddie, and please, guys, like, because Debbie, I'm going to come to you because your hand is up. So please don't feel you have to go into the chat. Like, we can hear from you. I don't have to just read in the chat. I'm just reading what's there, but we would love to hear from you. I'm just going to go through the chat right now. So I'm just going to, sorry, Maddie, you are saying, have you found that it's hard to fundraise within the animal protection space because of the growing desire to be EA focused? And I'm guessing you're saying here, Maddie, organizations targeting animal ag instead, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, just like within the movement, like, I mean, I'm finding this, that like a lot of people, they look at animals in like used in testing and they're like, it's not as many, like numbers wise,
Right.
it's not as many, and so we should be focusing on animal ag. These are the same individuals who don't realize that animal research is used for animal ag, but I digress. I'm just wondering if when all of this has been going on and trying to fundraise for the center, if this has been like part of the issue, trying, because like the animal rights space should be on board with this, and yet, I mean, I've found that there's less interest in putting money towards ending animal research, even though these issues are all connected and one can lead someone to an aha for the rest of the animals type thing.
I think in general, it is difficult to fundraise in Canada for a lot of things because we are small, right? We don't have the kind of money that they have in the United States and the European Union. So in general, for any cause, I think it's difficult because we are essentially looking to the same donor pool to get that. But then there are, people who donate. Like I raised what, $2.5 million, close to that in a few years for the work that I did because of the generosity of Canadians and some who gave big gifts, like the Eric Margulis Foundation. They gave $1.7 million. They gave $1 million for me to start the center to begin. That would have never happened without that. But at the end of the day, right, you can't simply depend on people to just, contribute to every single cause. And it just is not practical that way. And things like this can be very expensive. And it is expensive. So this is where the governments, right? This is the responsibility ultimately of a government to really focus on it and fund this kind of work. So yeah, I mean, I still hope that there are other Canadians who will come together to raise some funds to get this restarted, so we could, like reestablish it in Ottawa, and hopefully the next government will come through. Who knows? Maybe things will change in some way over the next year. It's hard to tell.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and just so you guys know, I'm going to go through the chat here, and then I know your hands are up and we're going to hear from you, and then I'm going to go through the chat and if you want to talk as well. So as long as you guys are okay staying, and I'm guessing you are, then we'll go through. So Athena, who you and I are going to have a call soon. I'm excited. So Athena says, with so many obstacles to face on a daily basis when it comes to improving animal welfare in Canada, how do you stay positive and optimistic for the future? I'm going to laugh and say, well, she calls me, but that's me. That's me just joking.
Sorry, girlfriend, I can't give you all the credit.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to take all the credit.
Three things, and I talked about this during my opening remarks of that conference I hosted. Three factors. Yes, you can easily give up, and I could easily give up. I mean, you don't know how many times I called Lori last year and I said, I'm done, I'm moving to Mexico. You know, and yes, you are like, you just really want to give up some days, and it's really difficult to stay optimistic. But the three things: one, the promise, the unbreakable promise that I made to Mowgli, it means the world to me. And number two, all those Canadians who are suffering from so many diseases prevalent in our society today. I feel a deep sense of obligation as a scientist to promote the type of technologies that will end up finding safe and effective treatments. And three, the students, like the ones that you saw, the ones that you heard from, those ones, the next generation that's thirsty for this. I think those are the three factors that keep my fire going.
That's a pretty incredible three. Let's just say that's a pretty incredible three. So, Laura, I'm going to skip you in the chat because your hand's up. So I'm going to come to you in a minute so you can chat. Miss Connie. So Miss Connie has her Beagle in front of her. Connie is an adopter for the Beagle Alliance and a supporter since day one, literally day one, day zero, even. So Connie says hi from Windsor, because she's in Windsor with her Beagle Astro that we got to meet. Connie and I got to meet when we brought Astro there. So she says, thank you for all you do. I hope you get funding soon to restart the center. And then Connie, you're saying, Lori, maybe I can answer, of the 16,000 dogs used in animal testing in 2023 were most beagles. And of course, Astro says hi. Well, of course, we don't know 100% which breed was used out of those 16,000, but we do know that statistically and globally, over 90% of the dog breeds use are beagles. So we're going to use that relative statistic and go on that, sadly. Sadly for any breed, of course, but beagles are the most used breed globally for reasons that they are docile and sweet, and they sadly are a manageable size and can fit in a cage so that they can use more of them at one time, and that's a hard and fast fact. So, and hi Astro, look at how gorgeous you look. And
thank you Lori, and thank you Dr. Charu, and I guess we miss you in Windsor. I don't know. Are you still here? Or?
I am still here.
Good.
In Windsor.
Good. All right. Well, I'm glad to hear that.
So and as I say, I'll get to everyone with their hands up. I'm not ignoring you. I'm just trying to go methodically in what I look at here. So,
Maybe we should go to Debbie. She's had her hand up for a while. And
okay, let's go.
The other, yeah.
Yeah, let's go to Debbie, my rock star friend who just put on a concert for the Beagle Alliance. And
I thought Laura's hand was up before mine, actually.
well, okay, well, whatever works.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I know Laura, Debbie,
okay.
go ahead because you're on, and then we'll speak with Laura right after.
Okay, well, I just want to make a few comments. Like, people who care about animals in this country, they're not only voters, they're taxpayers. And according to industry, like the pet industry, people spend $10 billion on their companion animals every year. That generates $700 million in GST. So there is no reason why the center is not receiving some of that money. As a matter of fact, that money should be going to all kinds of animal initiatives in this country, and it's a further shame that animal ag is subsidized dearly with millions of dollars to produce, like, quote unquote food that's actually causing these diseases.
Yeah.
That animal research is being done to try to find cures for. I think we need to perhaps make this an election issue. And I have written to my own MP, and it was probably regarding the center being closed. And I think it's the only time I've actually gotten a letter back that wasn't like the usual canned, we take the matter of animal welfare very seriously, where she actually showed real interest in what was happening with the center. She's an NDP MP. And I did send her more information, and I haven't heard back since, but there seems to be a little bit of interest in there. And I'll just close with saying in April, there's going to be, it's the 4th annual protest against vivisection. And apparently there are 50 cities across the globe that are taking part. So we're going to have something happening here in Winnipeg, and we'll sure make what's going on with the center part of the focus of that protest.
Thank you so much. That's an interesting statistic. The GST revenue from that, right? So yeah, I don't know. I don't know why the government didn't do anything. And this made the news, right? There was a Corporate Knights article from last November when our awesome animal-friendly MP Nathaniel Erskine-Smith actually made a comment that he did not understand why his government inexplicably stood on the sidelines while the center closed. So yes, I don't understand why it wasn't, why funds weren't dedicated and why something wasn't done, and for a very small amount of money compared to the kind of money that we waste on a lot of unnecessary things in this country.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Debbie. And of course, thank you for everything. And just so happy that you're in Manitoba with me fighting the good fight. Laura, Laura, we're gonna speak with you. And then of course, Michelle, love that you're here. So I'm gonna move to yours. And Lisa, I'm very intrigued by your comment too. So hold on, guys, because I'm coming to you. But Laura, please go ahead. I know you're in the chat, but let's just chat it out here.
Yeah, mine, actually, I was just mentioning that I accidentally hit enter too quickly. And my main question was, we phone call, we write letters, we hold rallies, and we still have one of the worst animal welfare laws in the world, never mind in North America or wherever. We have one of the worst animal welfare laws in the world. What can we do differently? Nothing seems to be stopping it. But now I think maybe Debbie, put her in charge, and maybe that will stop it. I think it would. Put Debbie in charge. She's a rock star.
Yeah, Debbie's a rock star. There's no doubt.
That was all I was going to say. It was just it was further to what you had mentioned earlier.
It's an interesting thing. I don't know. I don't know why we're such a complacent nation in some ways, and I don't know why our government doesn't listen to us, no matter who's in power.
I mean, we do hope this changes, and Charu and I've had this conversation where we really do. I mean, we are hoping there's going to be and of course, regardless of what party you're affiliated with, we're just, because it's not about the party, it's about
not
the
a partisan
people.
issue.
It's
not-
about the people, right? And so we're hoping that if a new government comes in, it's not so much about the party, it's about the fact that there'll be new ears that will hear us, and we're going to do our best to get to those people, and that maybe those people will be in a position that they hear us and can change. And you know, the campaign to fund Charu's organization is on our campaign page. B, of course, has created our campaign page so that it's pretty interactive and that you can email, and we have a link to the MPs. So please go to our page. We even have I should put it in the chat, and I will in a second, but you know, we even have a link, as I say, a link to the MPs. We even have a little bit of, you know, some, if you don't want to use your own words, or you want to add to some statements that we've made regarding funding Charu's organization, we have that. We've made it pretty easy. So let's just keep plugging it, right? Like, we just keep sending and sending, and we're working on a campaign right now in February where we just really want the government officials to know how important our animals are to us, and if we just keep going, at some point something's going to give, and that's the hope that we all have to have, right? Michelle, who of course has a former research beagle from the Invigo breeding facility, Molly.
Oh
She's
my
right
God.
there.
Wow.
And who I, now, of course, as I was speaking with Connie, we flew Astro there, so I did have an opportunity to bring Astro to Manitoba. But with Michelle, when the Invigo breeding facility shut down, we were blessed to fly a number of those dogs over and find homes. And Molly was one of those dogs. And we created a lot of friendships along the way to get those dogs to Canada. And then Michelle had a release for us last year. So when we brought 10 beagles over from a research facility, Michelle and and her husband had us over, and we had the release at their place, and we actually got to meet Molly, even though we hadn't over the year when she flew over. So I'm not going to read your thing, Michelle. You chat.
Okay. Yes. Hi. I just want to say I was crying. I'm glad my camera was off. I really thank you for sharing your epiphany moment. It was very touching. And I wondered if any of the colleagues that you worked with when you were in animal testing, if they questioned the methods, and like, is there any kind of movement in universities, people questioning? I know things follow the money, and these long established methods that aren't useful, but there must be others like yourself that question those methods. I'm just wondering, is there any movements in the university to counteract these long-standing methods, or other people that you know about or experiences?
So it's one of those things where it's directly associated with the culture of science that's been in existence for the last century. So yes, there are researchers who would say, oh, these animal experiments aren't giving us the results we want, or they aren't, you know, there's something wrong. They would recognize the limitations, and almost, there are lots of papers. If you look at the scientific literature, you will see that we always list the limitations. But people still go on because it's the gold standard. They would still do the experiment because they're like, well, it's the only way to do this. And we have to continue to do this, or try to make better animal models because we have these limitations. Let's try to overcome those limitations. So a lot of people will simply ignore, and I did that for years too, that, okay, this is the way it's going to be done. And there are some other people. So very recently, there was a researcher that I spoke with who actually told me, I know there's 99.6% drug failure rate in Alzheimer's disease, but he is going to create another mouse model of Alzheimer's disease because it's the only way that he can continue his research work. It'll be funded. And when you think about agencies, the federal funding agencies like the Canadian Institutes of Health Research and the National Institutes of Health in the United States, they are biased. There's something actually called the animal methods biased, and I've participated in conversations in the international arena about this, that it's very real that when you submit scientific papers or grants to be funded, people request animal data. This has happened to me personally too. And so this is the culture. So it's really difficult to break through that. And unless you have, I mean, for me, I'm like, I'm done, I walked away, but not everyone's willing to do that. So but you know, the kind of like students who would be trained, like my current PhD student, she would never, she told the Minister of Health when she met him, I would never touch a mouse. And you know, so so I think that generation is going to take over in time if we can continue this forward. And even in academia, there are researchers who want to do things differently, but it's the system that's in place favors animal research. So if you want to have that career, you want to get that next grant funded, you're going to do animal research.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, okay, so Lisa, you're in Ottawa. You work in a research facility affiliated with one of the universities. My first thought, and this is an entirely self-serving thought, my first thought is, do you want to call me separately? We'll sign an NDA, get me as many beagles as you can out of that facility or animals. That's my first thought. So I'm just going to throw that on the table. Lori at thebeaglealliance.org. We'll leave it at that. But but you have a different perspective. I mean, you're in Ottawa. As you say, you would love to have Charu there. And I'm just very intrigued by your perspective on this.
Well, I am a vegan and an animal rights activist, and I actually work in a clinic. My facility is a clinical area and a research area, and I'm actually in the clinical side. But my office was just relocated and they didn't have space for me. So they moved me into the research facility. And I know that there's animal testing happening on the floor above me. And it's just gut wrenching for me to know that every day. I know there's mice. I don't know about anything else, but yes, it would just, I would do anything to help. If you get to come to Ottawa, and I do have a lot of connections in our research facility, which is affiliated with one of the universities. You didn't mention which university, but anyhow, it's fine. I sent you a LinkedIn request, and yeah, I would be happy to do anything that I can to help, because I think what you do is amazing and wonderful. We need more people like you on the planet, all of you. And yeah, I want to do whatever I can.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, beyond thank you. Yeah, that's just amazing. Yeah, it makes me cry that you have to go through that and even deal with that. So I'm so sorry. That must just be so incredibly hard given what you believe, and to have to do that. But maybe you're there for a reason, and we'll have to go on that, right?
Exactly. Yes. And I talked to some of the researchers on my floor, and I'm planting seeds. That's what I'm trying to do. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's all you can do in the world of, with everything, with your children, with your friends, with the public. All you plant seeds, and you hope that and at some point you believe that there will be a harvest, and we all, I think, are impatient and we want it to happen yesterday, but you plant the seeds and you see them grow, and that's where hope comes in, right? I think that's what Charu and I have discussed over time, where you just cannot give up hope, and you have to hope that all the seeds that you've planted come to fruition at some point and in the perfect timing. Stephanie, hi, Stephanie. do you think Stephanie asked, do you
Hi.
think AI, hi, so nice to see you on
Hi.
camera. We just spoke a couple of weeks ago. Yeah. So
That's right.
do you
Yeah,
think
we did.
AI, we did, yeah, will have a role? This is a great question. Do you think AI will have a role in limiting or eliminating animal testing?
Absolutely. AI will have a big role to play. It already does have a big role to play in many different aspects. And yes, it will become a very important factor in coming up with these strategies and facilitating strategies to phase out animal testing.
Yeah, I think so too. Okay, so it's, almost 5 to 9, and I think I've gone through everything. I know, Maddie, you're asking Lisa about LinkedIn, and Lisa, can you invite me too, please, Lisa. Anyway, I honestly, this has been amazing. And as I said in the beginning, I cannot think of a more appropriate and honored guest to be here to start our year off in our town halls. I think that there's hope, and Charu's fighting the good fight, and I don't think that's going to end anytime soon. And I think that if we all stick together and just as you said, Lisa, plant the seeds, and Charu, work on the next generation, that not all is lost. And even though at this point in time the center is shut down, I believe that the best is yet to come. And I cannot personally thank you for everything you have done. And thank you in advance for what you have yet to do and for being here, because I know we're just going to carry on.
Thank you. It's a difficult place to be in right now because as much as I want to hold on to hope, I don't know, and I cannot wait around indefinitely.
No.
Right. And it's just something so I don't know what's going to happen. I really hope that something does over the next couple of months. There isn't much time left because it's already been a long time since the center was officially closed. And I mean, this is the thing, right? I hold Mowgli's urn from time to time. I mean, I hold it every day. It's really on my bed with my other kitty right now, my beautiful kitty I have right now, Amaya. So I look at both of them and I talk to them, and to me, it's not that I'm giving up. It's just I don't know what else to do because at the end of the day, I have absolutely done everything in my power. And I apologize to Mowgli that if I died tomorrow, I would be happy. I have no regrets because I think I've done absolutely everything I can. I don't know what else to do. And I really hope that something will happen, a miracle will happen, something will happen to continue this journey in Canada.
I agree. And I hope for that. And thank you for everything. And again, I'm gonna say this now because we have a campaign in February. It's going to include the fact that we want, Charu and her organization to be funded. We want dogs and all animals to be released from the facilities. We bring dogs in from the United States, as you guys know, because saving lives is saving lives, and that's what we do. And they are the greatest ambassadors to teach us that these animals can go on to live many years outside of the cage. But ultimately, our goal is to work with the Canadian facilities and with Charu and the Canadian and the CCAC to release dogs in Canada. So we'll keep you posted because we're working on campaigns to write your MPs. And as I say again, the link is there to write your MPs. You can do it today. And let's just keep talking to our friends and family. And Charu, thank you for being here. And of course, everybody here, thank you. You're the reason that we can make a difference. And there's nothing like our community. That's what it's all about. There's no one person or one organization that can do this. It literally takes the village, and we are the village. And I thank you guys for being here. we'll get this video up soon. Share it with your peeps. And again, Charu, love you and thank you for being here. And B, thank you as usual for making sure that everything goes smoothly. And thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, appreciate it. And, we'll see you at the next victory, right? We'll see you at the next victory. Thank you,
Yeah.
guys.
Hey, good
Have a
night.
great night. Bye.
Bye.
All right.